So I got to cut this piece of wood, this piece of oak right here. I just kind of eyeball it in there, made some marks on it, how wide it's going to be, and shave it down a little bit, get it kind of close. But I got to plane it down. I don't have a planer, you know. And then so that brings up another example of these fucking blade guards on these saws. I mean, these things are good if all your work is like right here and you have all your hands clear and you're at the table. But as soon as you're trying to do, like, I'm just gonna rip it with this thing. As soon as you're trying to do that kind of stuff with this saw, man, those blade guards, what'll happen is you'll start to cut it in the I don't know if I can show it. You start to cut it, and then a piece of the wood, if you're just ripping off a tiny piece or trying to shave something off, the piece will just get caught in there, and then it won't go through. It's not big enough to retract the blade guard as you're going. So now you got one hand holding the piece, you got one hand holding the saw, and it's this, man, I mean, these things are, I'm telling you, man, they're more dangerous than they are of value. I don't know. I mean, unless you're in the shop all day cutting the thing, but a lot of guys don't just use these kind of saws in the shop. A lot of these use them in the field. And in Cali, where I grew up, with the 77, which is also like a worm drive with a reverse blade where you can see the blade from the side you're cutting on, and everyone pinned them up all the time because you're hanging off roofs, you're on the side, you're doing this, and it just forces you also, you know, to have good habits with the saw. You know, you want to hold that saw nice and tight. These are just what the guys taught me, you know, that I always worked with that front of that saw. That's the critical point of that saw. When you line it up, you should be able to see a nice square right here before you start your cut. Oops, it's going to go wrong, or oops, it's going to go wrong. You should be able to see. You can see a square. You know, you can see a nice square edge developing right here, and with the table of your saw, you can see that developing. So, you know, that's how you start it. You got a good balance. Your saw's in a good balance. Holding it tight. If that saw is going to kick, it's going to kick back. So nothing goes behind the saw. Nothing, period, point blank, ever. Nothing ever goes behind the saw. Because if that thing kicks back, it's going to climb over the top and cut something up. I mean, my grandpa, man, old carpenter for the movies, man, master carpenter. But he's out cutting branches, me and him one day with a skill saw. He had a skill saw in his hand, and he's getting old, man. He was getting old and just doing it anyway. And those are the hardest parts to touch, because when you're cutting branches or trees with the skill, you can't get that flat table in the beginning. And even when you're cutting a lot of guys, like I was taught just because I don't build cabinets, but I was taught, I always leave the table all the way up. And then I adjust how far I'm cutting with how far I'm going to hold the blade down. I almost never cut with the full blade all the time, because it's the front of the saw that you're focused on. A lot of times, if you're just starting out, you'll start cutting with the saw, and your focus will be to try to keep the saw flat, and then it ends up, because of the nature of the way the blade's fitted, it ends up lightening the front like that. The front gets light. As soon as that front gets light, you've lost control of the saw. That front has to stay down on the saw. I mean, on the wood. That front has to stay down. So I was taught, you know, I just hold the back up all the time. If I want to cut a piece of plywood, I'll just drop it down a ½ inch and cut it. If I want to cut a 2x4, I'll drop it down here. So that's just how I was taught, and it keeps your focus on the front of that saw, which is a good thing. And then the other thing I was taught is, you know, as soon as you're done cutting, let's see, get this fucking thing going. Let your finger off the trigger before you're done cutting, so that the blade almost comes to a stop right when you're done. Pull it out and turn that fucking thing away from your body. I don't care how many times you see guys cutting and then they bring it back. Hey man, look at my cut, it's pretty good. And the blade's spinning and they're flowing, the saw's flowing all around over here like that. No, you're gonna cut wherever you are. You're gonna cut, you're gonna keep yourself the fuck away from that blade. You're gonna cut and you're gonna turn that blade out when you're done. And then, you know, whatever, the blade should have already stopped. Set it down easy. But those are some of the habits. So I'm gonna cut this thing from both sides with this saw, and I can't do it with the blade down. That's how this all started. With the blade guard, you know. That's great. Later.